Hey everybody, Nick here, back with another rant about lenses, terminology, and how it all fits into cinematography. Today I want to talk about three things. Number one, there is no such thing as lens compression. Number two, there is such a thing as equivalency of lenses, and you should really wrap your head around it. And number three, how does that all fit into anamorphic lenses and what they do with their stretching and squeezing and de-squeezing? All right. Recently, I've been really obsessing over the concept of buying like one exotic anamorphic lens. Specifically, I'm really thinking about a Zelmus Apollo. And this isn't something you can really easily purchase. You have to put down a very large pre-order deposit and then wait many months for them to make your lens and ship it to you. That's not super uncommon, but the uncommon part is that the only place to source them is directly from the manufacturer in Ukraine. And so it's a long wait, it's overseas, international, in a country with geopolitical turmoil, and it's tough to get hands on these lenses to even see them. They are available at a few rental houses, but I'm not in the Los Angeles area, so I can't really just easily, drive over for a quick look. So anyway, that component of my struggle aside, there's a few things I want to talk about as I sort of was, really zoning in on focal lengths and, if I'm constricted to one, how do I want that to work? What kind of looks can I get out of just one focal length? I'm really interested in what some other projects have been filmed on. There's lots of movies out there that have been filmed on basically one lens, one focal length. And they've been on every focal length you can imagine, from wides to tellies, everything in between. Generally, they're somewhere in the middle, but there's things as wide as 35, as long as 75 that I can easily name off the top of my head. Call Me By Your Name, a recent one that was shot entirely on 35, although that was on 35mm film, so it's a field of view similar to a 50mm on full frame. 1917 was shot entirely on a 47mm on full frame, so those fields of view were very similar. The Creator was shot on a 75mm Kowa anamorphic on a Sony FX3. I'm not sure exactly if they used as much of the sensor as they could, but I think they did, and that the lens covered the entire sensor, so that would be just a little bit longer. Anyway, and as I think about this thing, you see things like, well, longer lenses are better because they compress the background. I'm sure you've heard this before. You would have heard it, from day one as a stills photographer or cinematographer. But the truth is that lenses do not compress the background. Only one thing compresses the background, and that is your distance to the subject. Or a little bit more specifically, your distance to subject and your distance to the background, and the ratio of those two things. But the lens has nothing to do with how that background compresses against your subject. It's only that distance, or the ratio of those two distances. Your field of view determines how much of the whole picture you see. But we can demonstrate this really easily with a zoom lens. So if we keep our camera in a fixed position and look at a subject and zoom in on that subject, we have the exact same effect as merely cropping the image in. The background does not compress anymore when you zoom from 70 to 200, as in this example. The background stays exactly where it is relative to the subject. It's only your distance to that subject that makes the difference. And so if you see a demonstration of people saying, look, here is the lens compression effect, we keep the same framing and we change lenses, well, they're keeping the same framing by moving the camera. And it is indeed the movement of that camera and the changing of distance to subject that results in the compression. And then the fact that you're using successively longer or successively wider lenses just changes the framing so that it relatively matches in comparison. But you may think, hey, this is just semantics. Like, I understand how this works, I get it. But it's not just semantics, because if we're thinking about restricting ourselves to a single focal length, then the question we might say is, well, what compositions do I like the best, and how much can I cheat that by having a single focal length? So this leads me to my second poignant example, which is because it's only the distance to subject and not the lens itself that causes these effects, you can get a perfectly serviceable dolly zoom with a single focal length. So in these examples, I had just a 24mm lens on my camera, and I just slid the camera in and out or made the camera go closer and farther to my subject, and then in post cropped in to keep the same field of view. So this is a single focal length. Nothing about that focal length is causing the background to compress or decompress. It's all just my distance to the subject. Now, this sort of leads really nicely into topic number 2, equivalency of lenses. A lot of you here are going to say, I already understand this, and a lot of you may be thinking of this in terms of what we all come to understand quite quickly when we're switching from crop format APS-C or Super 35 sensors onto larger format, full frame, or similar size formats. We're taught pretty quickly, oh, okay, if you have a 50mm lens on this sensor, it'll give you the same field of view as a 75mm lens on this slightly larger sensor. And we learn terms like crop factor. But equivalency of lenses is a topic that is at once completely straightforward and simple and mind-bogglingly complex, such that as I first really learned about it 2-3 years ago, like it was one of those head explosion moments that hasn't stopped since then. The topic of equivalency of lenses is something that I keep learning more about as I see it from different angles and understand it differently. The concept isn't merely about lenses, but also involves image circles, apertures, and acquisition format sizes. So the focal length of the lens, it essentially, as we look through the camera, has to do with magnification, right? But it doesn't necessarily mean our field of view, not until we couple that with the size of the image circle that lens can project and the size of our acquisition format. Okay, sorry if I just lost you there, but let me give you an example. So there are lots of lenses out there that are built for larger formats than even our full frame sensors. A lot of you might be familiar with the Mamiya 645 format. That's a 6cm by 4.5 centimeter film for which lenses were made that would cover that entire circle. 6 centimeters wide is a lot more than 36mm. It's like almost double, not quite. If you put the 32mm 645 lens on a full frame camera, it will give you a field of view exactly like any other 32mm lens. All 32mm lenses will give you the same field of view on a given capture format, as long as their image circle can project that large. If their image circle can't project that large, you'll still get the same field of view, you'll just have a lot of black on the outsides, right? And so on the 645 camera, you'll get a field of view that is, you know, like roughly half. Since we've doubled the sensor size, we get half the field of view, more or less. And so what you can get out of a lens just depends on its focal length, imaging circle, and your acquisition format. And we can take this to crazy extremes too. So for example, a project that I devoted a lot of time to is called the F0 camera. It's a system I made that allows you to adapt 8x10 lenses and acquire the image digitally using an intermediate focal plane. I didn't come up with the idea in general. That's been around forever with depth of field adapters and so forth. But the F0 camera was the first one that lets you sort of do that in a turnkey way to acquire digitally what was previously only able to be captured by projecting onto 8x10 film. So, you know, there are a couple lenses with the system that I sort of developed, but you can adapt other lenses like the famous Leitz Hector 300mm f2. Let me go grab it. Okay, so here is an example of such a lens. This is the very famous Leitz Hector 300mm f2.8 lens. This thing is an absolute beast, and I love it. And if you mount this lens on a full frame camera, you'd have to come up with some kind of little adapter, but it can be done and it's not, you know, crazy difficult. What you'll get on that full frame camera is exactly the field of view and depth of field of any other 300mm f2.8 lens. But this lens can project a much larger image circle than a 36x24 full frame sensor. It can project an 8x10 image circle. The image it projects is like that. And so if you capture that, what do you get? Well, if we use the equivalency of lenses principle, the resulting field of view is similar to a 30mm lens, or about a 35mm lens, because 8x10 is about 9 to 10 times bigger than full frame in each dimension. And so you get 1/10 the field of view and 10 times less depth of field. And so if you use this 300mm lens and project its full 8x10 circle, to get the same field of view on full frame, you would need something like a 33mm lens that was as fast as about f0.4. Let that sink in for a second, because that's crazy to me. I know a lot of you love to come on my channel and tell me that shallow depth of field is just a YouTube noob amateur hour gimmick, and that's fine. If you don't like it, you don't have to like it. But that to me is insane and really interesting, and that's why I spent so much time developing the F0 camera. But the point is, for me, it makes you think about these things differently. So an 8x10 camera with a 300mm f2.8 lens creates an image that can't be created other ways. There are no 35mm f0.4 lenses out there. And the only things that are kind of close are really not usable, and they have images that are really not good. That's really the tip of the iceberg when it comes to equivalency of lenses. I've mentioned this before, but I highly recommend taking a nosedive into the depth of field calculator made by Points in Focus. It is a fantastic online tool that can help you grasp these concepts a little bit more viscerally. So you can input, hey, I'm shooting on this format and I'm using this lens. What is that equivalent to in all the other formats? And it spits out that chart for you in a really easy to read format, so you can really wrap your head around it. And it's really helpful for things like when there are slightly larger formats coming out, like the Fujifilm GFX 100, and the lenses that are actually available that will cover it, to tell you, okay, is this juice worth the squeeze? Is this 85mm f1.8 actually going to be any faster than what I've got over here with this 50mm f1.2? And sometimes the answer is no. Sometimes the answer is you may want that lens for other reasons. It may have other character or flares or bokeh or some other quality that you like. But having just a better grasp of the equivalency of lenses is just so helpful for so many reasons. So let's bring this back to the concept of anamorphic, because I hear all the time, I've even heard anamorphic lens manufacturing employees say this thing the wrong way. You'll hear this all the time. You'll go, oh, well, you know, a 50mm 2x stretch anamorphic, it has the field of view of a 25mm because of the D-squeeze, but it has the compression of a 50. And so that's what's so wild and special about anamorphic. And hopefully, if you're starting to follow the video, you'll understand that that is utter nonsense. There is no such thing as a lens that has field of view X and compression of Y, okay? First of all, lens compression doesn't exist. It's just your distance to the subject and the field of view that you're capturing. Okay, but anamorphic changes your field of view because of the D-squeeze, right? Yes and no. Okay, so first of all, that comparison of the 25mm field of view, because the 50 divided by the 2 times stretch is 25, that's only true if A, your anamorphic lens covers your entire acquisition format, and B, you use that entire resulting image. So for a 16:9 sensor, that would mean you're using a 32:9 image, which is just unusably wide. If you crop back down to, let's just say 16:9 again, now you have exactly the same image, like a 50mm anamorphic shot and cropped back to 16:9, regardless of the stretch ratio, gives you a 50mm field of view, period. And so that's why in the last video when I was talking about the Laowa anamorphics, which are fantastic, by the way, I was saying like, oh, I like that I can just shoot the full height of my sensor. I wind up with this 2:1 image that's just beautiful, and it makes use of almost all the imaging circle of the lens. I'm shooting and getting a field of view exactly what I expect. So when I was shooting the 35mm in 1:1 mode on this guy, my trusty V-Raptor X, it results in a 2:1 image, which is a smidge wider than the 17:9 sensor on this camera. And so, okay, if you compare the 35mm Laowa Proteus in that mode, 2:1, to a regular 35mm lens, the fields of view would be exactly the same, with just a smidge more on the side. And even if you say, well, I'm going to shoot in 6:5 and have a 2:4:0 ratio at the end, okay, you've got your 16:9 and now a little bit more on the sides, but you haven't changed the compression or anything like that. What I tend to think of it as is, okay, whatever your final width is as your deliverable, okay, great. So that's your lens focal length. So in the case of the Laowa, you know, maybe it's 32, you know, because I'm getting a little bit more on the sides than I'm used to with a 35, and then just cropping in. So it's like a 32mm slightly cropped or whatever. You can think of it however you want, but the point is like the field of view with the compression of is just nonsense. That's also another reason I like shooting the full height of the sensor with anamorphics as much as I can. Not only it makes the use of as much of the imaging circle as I can get, but it gives me a field of view that I'm familiar with. So when I grab a 35, I know it looks like a 35. So all that said, do I have a direction I'm considering with this insane lens purchase that I've been talking about? I think I want to get the Zelmus Apollo 50mm lens. I've really vacillated on this a lot. I thought about trying to get the 75. The entirety of The Creator was shot on a Kowa 75mm lens, and not the entire movie, but like 98%, right? And I like that movie. I like the look, but I think if I was on 75 all the time, I would be sad. I would be missing, I'd be missing things out to the side. I thought about the 40, the Zelmus Apollo 40mm. It covers, all of them appear to cover full frame in 1:1 mode at least, but maybe not. So I'm not sure. Anyway, I thought about the 40, but the 40 is weaker wide open as far as I understand. And the 50, you get a real nice bump in performance on the 50, and it would be, so the 50 is a 1.7, and at 1.7 it's gonna have real soft edges and a lot of ghosting. But even at like T2, it appears that, you know, it'll bite reasonably well and be usable. So a 50mm T2 2x anamorphic with those flares and at that weight, the Zelmus Apollos weigh less than 2 kilograms each, and that's really intriguing. That may get my vote, but tell me what you all think. Honestly, whether you know anything about the Zelmus lenses or not, if I put you in a chair and said, hey, you get to pre-order one of these and you're gonna have to shoot everything on it, what do you think? You know, as I've mentioned before, I kind of love 50s. I love shooting on 50s, and it, you know, I shoot so much on it. So it seems like it's a natural choice, but I don't know. As I was thinking through, you know, these field of view questions, equivalency of lens questions, whether or not that means anything at all. I've really just been kind of like turning that over and over and over and over in my head. Originally, I thought, okay, if I could get 2, it would be like 40 and 75, and that would be dope. But I can't get 2. I can get 1, maybe. And so I think maybe the 50 should be it. But please tell me what you think. There was a lot going on here. I was in a lot of different places, and if you made it here to the end and you watched all the way through, thank you. Thank you so much. That was long and drawn out, and some of you may tell me I'm crazy and clueless and terrible at life and everything else, and that's okay. You can say that. But I have a ton of fun making these and sort of thinking about this stuff, and I love reading what all of you have written, and thanks for being here. So that was another long-winded way to say thank you for watching this long-winded video. Tell me what you think. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.